It's official. Video games are the biggest entertainment medium on the planet.
Thousands of titles.
Millions of players.
Billions of dollars.
But that's not important, because it's not the big numbers that make gaming great.
It's the experience.
You already know that, and so do we.
This isn't another show just trying to justify gaming.
What's there to justify? It's awesome.
It is.
No, we're here to cut through the noise.
And speak from our hearts.
About the games that we love,
And even those that we don't.
Because we love games just as much as you.
from Wii Sports
To esports.
From the platformer
To the puzzler.
All are welcome in this Video Game Nation. How do you define yourself when there's nothing else to live for? And if the most that you can hope for is to live just one more day, is there any point in going on if you're never moving forward? Yeah, we've had zombie games before, tons of them in fact, but there are none quite like The Last of Us. Naughty Dog, the studio behind one of the PS3's biggest blockbuster franchises, Uncharted, brings us its unique take on the end of the world, where a highly infectious plague, inspired by real-life fungus cordyceps, turns human hosts into cannibalistic monsters. Unfortunately, this is one fungal infection that a tube of Caniston couldn't fix. We've all played zombie games before. Aim for the head, shoot, kill, win, rinse, repeat. But what made The Last of Us stand out, or one of the many things that made The Last of Us stand out, was its focus on telling a compelling story, and it's taking the time to make us care about the central relationship between its two characters, Joel and Ellie. These two aren't your typical macho meathead protagonists. Joel is taciturn and at times hard to like, sure, but thanks to a tense and brutal pre-credits sequence set 20 years before the main game, it's hard not to sympathise with him. You may not always agree with his choices, but you at least understand why he makes them. There's an air of both resignation and recklessness about Joel, present in his gruff dialogue and in the brutally violent, almost matter-of-fact way he deals with his enemies. But over the course of the game, we see life and a willingness to live it returning to him as he begins to soften towards his unlikely travelling companion. And Ellie? Well, she's pretty special.
Obviously, Ellie has an excellent name. That is a really good starting point for a character. But I really like Ellie in The Last of Us because she's sort of a strong female character, but she's not just a sort of one-dimensional sort of space marine with boobs.
Repeat it.
What you say goes.
She is a way of introducing the audience to, this hellish nightmare of a thing that's going on, without putting you in peril all the time. Like, it gives you something to do because you really want to protect Ellie all the time.
The way that she behaves in downtime is really important. The way that she'll, you'll be exploring a house upstairs, you'll come down and she's just playing darts.
I thought Ellie was a fantastic character. I think Ellie was possibly one of the most important video game characters in narrative gaming history.
Joel?
He left us to die out there.
The games are always about power and they're never about how scary and terrifying these worlds are. So I think Ellie was wonderful. I wish in some ways that there would be a version of the game that would come out where you played her for most of the game and you played Joel less.
So is that everything you hoped for?
Jury's still out. But man, can't deny that view.
The Last of Us's portrayal of women and LGBTQ characters is remarkable in just how perfectly understated it is. In this world, a person's sex or sexuality is secondary to their ability to fight and to survive. Like Joel and Ellie, characters like Bill or Tess or Riley, they just want to live one more day. And it's not just the cordyceps-infected humans, also known as clickers, that they'll have to deal with. This is a world where a stranger might happily kill you for the clothes on your back. And whilst the cover-based combat in The Last of Us can get a little stale over time, you can make it more interesting by using scavenged supplies to create better tools and weapons to fight back with. The combat is a constant push and pull between stealth and cover-based shooting, but it also owes a fair debt to classic survival horror. Human enemies use line of sight to hunt you down, but clickers, well, they're a little bit more interesting. They use sound to hunt you down and flush you out. In short, they're a tricky bunch to navigate.
I think that the clickers are obviously the best because they just create these sections of really intricate, interesting stealth.
I would always try to be stealthy when I was approaching situations, and I would always fail.
I've actually developed two quite sophisticated techniques for dealing with the infected in The Last of Us. Technique 1 is to run away. Technique 2 is to run away, but while shooting at the enemies. Now, I'm not going to say these techniques are foolproof, but in my experience, they are generally sometimes guaranteed to work.
Yep, you'll never look at a mushroom risotto the same way again. But in truth, clickers and the need to fight them aren't really what The Last of Us is all about. This is a game with storytelling firmly at its heart, and I'm not just talking about the central narrative between its two stars. My favourite thing about The Last of Us is its intricately detailed, beautifully destroyed world. No matter how many abandoned houses or shops or hotels you wander into to pick clean of supplies, every single one of them feels like there's a different story behind it. You get a sense of the people that lived and very likely died there. Joel and Ellie are searching for a new American frontier through the wreckage and scattered remnants of an old one. But don't let the gruff old Texan and the sequences on horseback fool you. They aren't trailblazing, and this is no great American dream. With death and decay on all sides, this is an American nightmare. Whilst its story is somewhat derivative of classic works of fiction by the likes of Cormac McCarthy or Richard Matheson, as a gaming narrative, The Last of Us sets its standards high. It wants us to think about more than just go here, shoot that, move on to the next objective. It wants us to think about and to feel the things that happen before and after you pull the trigger. At the end of everything, it's our relationships that define us, and that can't be for nothing.
Howdy gang, high def, high five. Since the dawn of gaming, bearing in mind that gaming is one of the only reasons I've ever seen the dawn, games have lusted to be like the movies. From cinema tie-ins that couldn't tie in, to the only bad film that couldn't be fixed by murdering the cast, and all the way to sprawling odysseys of truth, justice and fabulous hair, the budgets have gotten bigger, the dimensions have gotten wider, and if you want to stand in the rain, let your voice actor act their little hearts out, or just walk away from an explosion like the boss you just killed, games can make you the movie hero you want to be. Today we're looking at 3 generations of cinematic adventure game. 3 games that took the tech of the day, added stories and cutscenes, and really made you feel like your first name was Keanu, Arnold, Jean-Claude, or if you're unlucky, Dolph. Seriously, if your name sounds like the noise your character makes when they fall too far in Dark Souls, it's not a name. First up, it's Eric Shahi's 16-bit masterpiece, Another World. Another World is the 1991 classic that proved 2D platformers could do atmosphere 2 decades before the indie scene proved it again. You are Lester, a computer programmer transported to a parallel world where you'll either learn fast or die in ways you don't expect. The first level is a test of how quickly you can realise that everything hates you. This pool? Hungry tentacles. These tiny black things? They've got poison barbs. This thing that looks like it'll eat you? It'll eat you. This is the game's first cutscene, back at a time when, well, we just never got any of those. And it's a great piece of storytelling. Lester holds out his hands in the universal display of friendship. We see the eyes of the hooded figure, there's a pause, and bang! Yep, they don't like you either. A sci-fi epic played out like a silent movie and starring a red-haired IT expert, I give Another World 9 out of 10 blown minds. The 20th anniversary edition just came out. Go get it. From mind-blowing to neck-cracking, our second game is the first 3D adventure in the series where everyone's a clone and cardboard boxes aren't just for cats on the internet. It's Metal Gear Solid for the PS1. This is the game that taught everyone I went to school with 3 things. 1. Stealth is good. 2. Cigarettes will slowly kill you. And 3. You know you're awesome when your name is Snake. Metal Gear Solid puts you smack bang right in the middle of the action movies of the early 90s, with just enough eccentric flourishes from the game's director Hideo Kojima to stop the whole thing becoming the sort of game that little boys talk about to prove they've hit puberty. GTA 5. Yeah, pretty much just GTA 5, really.
Right from the start, you feel like the mercenary super soldier you are, a perfect secret agent with an action movie team that cares about you, from your boss on the radio to the woman who's really upset every time you die.
The best part is it looks serious, it sounds serious, and it isn't.
You might be snapping necks and sniping bad guys, but no game can be grim when your enemies express their feelings with alarms and punctuation. It's like you're murdering The Sims.
Still a challenge 16 years on, and a game so good it spawned a franchise with a plot so twisted it's all twists and no plot. Metal Gear Solid gets 9 cardboard boxes out of 10.
Final game now, and it's one that went straight out and said, cinematic adventure. You mean Indiana Jones?
But if you don't want to use the world's most badass archaeologist, make your own and you get Nathan Drake, star of Uncharted 2, Among Thieves.
Nathan Drake starts his best adventure with style, wounded, heaving, and falling out the back of a train because it's dangling off a cliff.
The minute the game starts, you go, ho ho ho, this is gonna be fun.
And fun it is. Get ready for museums, betrayal, trouble with the law. It's just like when I took my girlfriend to Paris and actually, I don't want to talk about it.
The action sequences are well designed, the controls are good, and probably best of all,
Drake's a wisecracking action hero who's actually funny. Anyone who played the first Prince of Persia on Xbox 360 knows that's hard to do, because a hero who makes fun of what's going on sometimes just comes across as complaining.
And if I wanted to play an adventure where the hero just kept whining, I'd call it My Life. Too depressing.
Sharp, colourful, chock full of movie tropes with a gun in its pocket and its tongue in its cheek, Uncharted 2 Among Thieves is solid, funny fun. 8 out of 10 tough guy stubbles.
What could possibly
My greatest cinematic adventure will always be that time I got lost at the local multiplex and had to follow the smell of popcorn back to the concession stand. Speaking about getting lost, why don't you guys take a break, because I need to figure out where I am. They told me I was filming in a studio today. Hello? Anyone?
You are a horrible person. That's what it says. A horrible person.
Welcome back. Now, whilst The Last of Us did such a good job of telling an interesting story, that story didn't always line up with your actions as a player. For example, can we really believe that Joel is capable of compassion and love when he kills so many guys with his bare hands? It's a tricky line that games nowadays have to walk. How do you tell a good story without letting it dictate or restrict gameplay? And how do you ensure gameplay doesn't somehow contradict or overshadow a game's narrative? And when you really get down to it, why is storytelling so important to a game anyway?
I think storytelling has definitely evolved in games over the last 25 years. I think we're still a long way behind cinema and a long way behind novels, obviously. But if you look back 25 years or further to the early 80s, when you had games like Donkey Kong, and it was very much fairy tale style, save the princess, kill the baddie, save the entire planet sort of thing.
When games began, it was, just mechanical exercises. It was just stuff about blobs moving around the screen. And then, someone decided that actually, no, this blob should have a name. It should be Pac-Man or something, and the enemy should have names. And okay, there's no story here, but there's characters. You're not just playing as some faceless, nameless thing.
I think not only have games narrative kind of evolved in that because the technology is much more complex, we can get much more in-depth stories, but also people making games are older now. So you've got people like Hideo Kojima and David Cage and Neil Druckmann at Naughty Dog that are older, who have kids, who want to explore different themes and ideas, and not just, well, let's put a bunch of people in a room and then shoot them.
Hostile infiltrated.
I think it's diverged in two ways. You have games like Portal 2 where it's very environmental storytelling and you are playing out these scenes.
Well done. Here come the test results. You are a horrible person. That's what it says.
Whereas in The Last of Us, I think it's gone down a more cinematic route, like you're being shown non-interactive cutscenes. And I think that's not the best thing that games can do. The games can be better than cinema and better than books. They can allow players to interact with scenes and be part of the story.
My favourite game of story is there's an obscure 2011 shooter called Bulletstorm, which is one of the greatest shooters ever made and was massively underrated. It's basically about a group of mercenaries who are betrayed by a kind of a villainous space captain. And at the start of the game, they drunkenly try to crash his kind of Star Destroyer by crashing into it with their tiny little spaceship. But the whole thing is actually kind of a meta-narrative. It's a meta-story about game stories and how ridiculous they are.
I was following leads on Confederate supply liners. Came out of warp and it was just there.
Monkey Island 2. Brilliant story. Really funny. Anything Tim Schafer does. Brilliant.
How appropriate. You fight like a cow.
I really like what the Stanley Parable did with the storyline, which was to kind of mess with the whole idea of an in-game narrative and play with your concepts as a gamer and your own experiences and make you think about that.
This is the story of a man named Stanley.
I actually really enjoyed the 2013 Tomb Raider.
I can't just leave him out there alone. I need to get to him.
I know a lot of people think it's not a great story, but I loved the way that the items were woven into the experience and the character. The way she gets fire arrows, for example, is a really big part of her actual character development. You know, it's a moment, it's like a threshold for her character between kind of a sort of an innocence and something else, you know.
I think storytelling and game design, it just has to be the exact same thing. Like the amount of time spent on both, that you can't have a decent storyline and it's, you know, it's not fun to play. And at the same time, like really, you know, you see stuff like Call of Duty, it can be fun to play, but the storyline is awful and people, you know, moan about it. Like, I think it has to be a really, really decent split.
I think really we'll know that games are mature when you have a narrative game where the story works hand in hand with the action. Like Half-Life kind of hinted at this future by hiding its cinematic scenes inside the game, so it felt like you were still able to explore as Gordon while you were receiving the kind of plot points.
I never thought I'd see a resonance cascade, let alone create one. Gordon, you're alive.
I don't think story should be secondary or even primary. I think story should be threaded through every facet of a game. It should be part of the game's design. It shouldn't be sort of clipped onto the side of it in non-interactive cutscenes.
I don't think it's true that every game has to have an amazing storyline. You know, I'm not sure that I would enjoy Pong anymore if I knew the sort of origins and background of the little white square. So, but for those games where it is important, I think it has to come at the start of the development process. A good story can make a game much more compelling and engaging, can really make you think and move you in a lot of instances. That's not too common at the moment, but with games like The Last of Us, hopefully we'll see more of it.
According to the video games edition of the Guinness World Records, the very first cutscene appeared in 1981's Donkey Kong. It takes 12 seconds to establish the premise, and then it's left to the player to fill in the middle and the end.
That's a great template and one that many games followed for years. But somewhere along the way, someone decided that letting us get on with it wasn't enough. Before you knew it, games became bloated with cutscenes. The fact that a game would be broken up by hours worth of lavishly rendered, badly written and poorly acted non-interaction actually became a selling point.
What is going on?
It is madness! Guards have turned on each other! Something has gone terribly wrong! It is madness, I tell you! Madness!
I think cutscenes are a lazy method of storytelling. If a film insisted that the audience complete a series of activities before the story could continue, you'd question the sanity of the studio responsible.
But for some reason, we've come to accept these clumsy impediments to our enjoyment, even when the likes of Metroid Prime, Portal and the Stanley Parable have shown us how beautifully game and narrative can coexist.
This is why I don't quite know what to make of The Last of Us's countless Game of the Year accolades. I mean, there's no questioning that it tells a great story, but in those moments that I'm allowed to participate, I found its cycle of cover shooting and simple stealth grew quite repetitive, really.
So, have we reached a point where the quality of a game's narrative is more important than how it actually plays? I decided to put the question to Mike Bithell, creator of acclaimed indie game Thomas Was Alone.
So Mike, I've expressed that I believe that Last of Us is stronger as a story than it is a game. Well, what's your take on it?
So I really like Last of Us, actually. I'm a big fan of it. It's, I think what they did really interestingly was they took quite a straightforward stealth game, and then they managed, with story, yes, to elevate it. And I think the story definitely does take it to that next level. As has always been the case with those guys. They've done, you know, with Uncharted, very similar thing. Uncharted was a reasonably straightforward platformer with a good third-person shooter, but what they do better than I think anyone else in the industry is they just add character and personality to the storytelling, and they elevate these things beyond what the sum of their parts, which is what we're all trying to do, right?
So the reason I wanted to talk to you about this was really because I admired the way that you tackled narrative in a game with Thomas was alone. What's your personal approach to it? What reason did you choose to kind of not go the cutscene route, as it were?
The primary deciding fact was money, as in a lot of kind of indie stuff, is that I just couldn't afford cutscenes. Like it really is that simple. Like it was, you know, that's the reason it's rectangles. That's the reason it's so lo-fi, is because those tools weren't available to me. They also take you out of the experience, which is something that's which is interesting, that where you can overlap storytelling and gameplay, that's where stuff gets very cool.
So do you think there's still room for the cutscene in gaming? I mean, Mass Effect's a great example. One of my favourites is always Resident Evil 4, where you think you can put the pad down and then it'll just throw a QTE in the middle of it really unexpectedly. Do you think that's key to keeping the player paying attention, I guess, through these moments where they're supposed to be putting the pad down? I think cutscenes are one tool. I think we have this, you know, games are this unprecedented medium where we just can use everything. Like every entertainment or art form that precedes video games can be used in video games. We're kind of an amalgam of everything. Cutscenes are one tool. They're one thing that we can see, we can take from film, and we can go, okay, we can put up a video on the screen for 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, 20 minutes if you're Hideo Kojima, and just kind of let roll. And that's fine, but yeah, I think mixing it up is always the way to go. Trying to find our own forms is also cool. Basically, for me, I'll use anything I can to tell a story, and cutscenes are one of the many ways we can do that. Do you think people can be more forgiving of an average game if the story is compelling enough?
Yeah, absolutely. Mediocre games can absolutely be, I'm living proof of this, mediocre games can absolutely be supported by a story that works for people. And likewise, there are games with absolutely awful stories that I've just kept playing because they're fun. Just Cause 2 comes to mind as a game that was just really, really bad in lots and lots of different ways, but that core gameplay activity elevated it beyond anything else. Games are this massive bag of cool things. And yeah, if there's enough cool in there cumulatively, I think you can usually forgive a couple of problems.
And finally, gun to the head situation.
Nice.
Would you choose? Would you choose a game with a strong narrative and weak gameplay, or would you go for a game with a strong game and very little in the way of storyline and characterization?
Gun to my head, there's no other way that games can be made. I will always choose gameplay first because it's the thing that we can do that no one else can.
Well, we've come to the end of the road on our journey together. We've dissected storytelling, scrutinized cinematic gameplay, and murdered a bunch of mutant mushrooms. All in a day's work, really. But if you don't mind, I'm going to try and find my way out of here. Anyone? No? Okay. Well, I'm going to hug a brick, and hopefully I'll run into a giraffe and not a clicker. I'll see you guys next time. Hopefully. Bye.
How much?